योर हाइनेसेस लूला डी सिल्वा को और मैं उनको
And now I
प्रेसिडेंसी का गेवल सौंपता हूं.
That was India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, closing this year's summit of the G-20 in New Delhi, India. He said he was handing the gavel to next year's president of the G-20, Brazil's President Lula da Silva. The world's 20 largest economies released a joint declaration after the summit Saturday. For more on that, we go to Moscow to speak with analyst Mark Sleboda. Mark, pleasure to have you with us.
We all know that this last weekend was the annual presidential level G20 summit held this year in New Delhi, India. And I think everyone is aware that this was probably the single most important event of the year, and that geopolitical earthquakes could affect everything going forward. Just kidding. It was it was another multilateral talking shop organization in photo op with little more than that.
It was Modi's, debut, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, suddenly it's the most populous country, and they're sliding up in terms of economics, etc.
Exactly. That is held in New Delhi. The theme was one of these, relatively standard G20 fluffer nonsense. We are one Earth, one family, and we share one future. Yeah, kumbaya.
Corporate and nonprofit gobbledygook.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, aspirations, whatever. The symbol that India used for the event included the Earth partially wrapped in a lotus flower, right? Symbolic of India, and it was kind of India's, shall we say, coming out or Sweet 16 party, right? India is showcasing their global strength. They're now the most populous country in the world, overtaking China. Not that I'm sure that's actually something to be proud or something good about, considering the vast gulf in living standards and malnutrition and health and everything, life expectancy between India and China, or entirely. But India has also moved up in terms of the international economic ranking, generally, depending on your standard, up to fifth, which is more commensurate with the most populous country in the world. And also, India successfully put a probe on the moon last week, which is quite an accomplishment that only a few countries in the world have done. And it is noticeable that Russia attempted to repeat it the week before that and failed. They had a problem with their lunar lander.
With each of those, it should be said, they were landing it near one of the poles on the moon. This is the first time. It's a more difficult maneuver than the conventional orbital, like around the equator of the moon.
Yes, correct. But anyway, it was, something big celebrated as an accomplishment in India. So it was quite a week, and certainly the West was doing their and has been doing their best to court India. But I think it is also notable because there was two missing members in terms of leadership, at least. Neither Russian President Vladimir Putin went because, India is not a member of the International Criminal Court, but I think he went to avoid controversy and to avoid having to talk and some type of stunt from Western leaders, like walking out when he was speaking or something like that. And also the president of China, Xi Jinping, did also not attend. And I think that both of those two countries, considering how close they are geopolitically, not intending, is intended to send a message. Not necessarily at India. I don't think. I mean, China has their geopolitical tensions with India and a lingering border dispute over an uninhabited plateau at the top of the world that no one else cares about. But I think it was more China and Russia see no point in talking to the West at this point, right? There are no structures for dialogue built. No diplomatic work has been done to warrant such a meeting. So it's pointless for them to go. And they were just at the BRICS meeting and met most of the other countries' leaders. Certainly Xi Jinping did previously. So China and Russia's place was held by the Chinese Premier Li Kang and by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov instead. The only really notable thing to come out of this summit is that the African Union was invited to become a permanent member with equal rights to the European Union, which is also a member of the G20. So now it will technically be 21, which gives them an additional platform, and it was the idea of more voices for the global South. If only the G20 actually had any power, any purpose, and did anything. The West, of course, attempted to hijack the Indian summit over the issue of Ukraine, which India largely prevented. Zelensky was purposefully not only not invited, refused attendance by India. And the West hoped to take advantage of the absence of Putin and Xi Jinping to twist the rest of the global South to their position on a G20 declaration. Again, has no real power, no legal mandate, no meaning, but the G20 summit traditionally ends with the declaration, and they failed to get what they wanted through. They failed to change the minds of the half of the G20 basically that belong to the global South. And the statement coming out, the declaration, makes only very modest statements about the crisis in Ukraine. Only essentially that the conflict has concerns with global and food and energy security, supply chains, macro financial stability, inflation, and growth, makes complicated economic environment the world over. But it also notes that the G20 is not the platform to resolve geopolitical or security issues, and that's basically it. And a statement that everyone agrees that with the UN Charter principles of sovereignty and non-interference in domestic political affairs, which is amazing coming out of the U.S. because the West doesn't believe
that's the stock and trade.
yeah, that's the violating sovereignty. For the last 2 decades of countries around the world as you rightly said, been their stock and trade. So that was it. And this is being attacked in Kiev as something that is a huge disappointment in this declaration. And we've had statements out of the U.S. Congress, in fact, McConnell saying that this is a slap in the face of Volodymyr Zelensky, this declaration. So that's it. Really, nothing else happened, but nothing really does. Most foreign policy experts agree that the only real important thing is the bilateral meetings that happen on the side of the summit between world leaders, which is to say hobnobbing and networking. That's it.
That's it. So thank you for that report, Mark, and we'll see you again next week.
Yep.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.